Representative Boback and myself. I believe it's our third one. This one actually sold out, I think, in like 2 or 3 days. We will be having more coming up as this continues. But thank you for coming out here to learn more about your rights and your Second Amendment rights and what the laws are here in Pennsylvania. It really is a pleasure to be here. And I know Representative Boback, Sheriff, thank you, everybody that's here today. I'm here to introduce this lady who's walking in right now, our DA, Stefanie Salavantis. Stefanie works close. And thank both of them for being here, because while we help get the word out there, this is really their show about letting know what's out there and what we're looking at in the law. So really thank you to both of them, and I think they deserve another round of applause. Really. So our district attorney, Stefanie Salavantis. Stefanie works closely with all local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies and attorneys throughout Luzerne County. She also oversees victims resource coordinators, community outreach programs, and dedicates an enormous amount of time to diversionary programs that benefit juveniles of our community, as well as investigating and prosecuting elder abuse cases, which have unfortunately risen to an all-time high. Stefanie is also very involved in our community and works side by side with volunteers and various other professional organizations in order to help build a stronger community and remain in constant contact with the public.
Thank you. My turn. And before I introduce our sheriff, I do want to tell you that I'm grateful for the wonderful turnout. We always ask for you to reserve a seat. When you said it was a sellout, there's no charge involved. But we take numbers because of the fire marshal. In the areas such as this, where they allow us to have these functions, we have to abide by the law, as I'm sure you can imagine. So only so many people can be in one place, according to the fire marshal. So thank you for understanding that. Also, this is our third. It's actually my 10th. I've been having these in Wyoming County as well as Luzerne County. And in the upcoming month, I'll have 3 more, 2 more in Wyoming and 1 in Lackawanna. And the reason for that is the demand. Law-abiding citizens want to know what their rights are and how to abide by the law. And I can't tell you how proud I am of my constituency, as well as yours, that we just keep on having these. And once you think it's done, we already started a list for the next Luzerne County one that I will be having. Once again, it's because law-abiding citizens want to know the law and how to carry their weaponry and what they can do under the guise of the Castle Doctrine. So without further ado, I get to introduce our good sheriff. Brian's duties include supervising all deputies and clerks of the department, acting as an officer of the courts to serve all forms of court documents. He provides and maintains courtroom security. I feel really safe in this. Provides transportation of prisoners to and from the courthouse, and he provides support for the state and federal correctional institutions as far as transporting prisoners. His issues that are qualified would be applicants to license to carry firearms, and I'll repeat that. That's one thing that he does. He does, he's one. Your office does issue the permits, correct? Yes. And he conducts sales of real estate and personal property located in Luzerne County. That's Sheriff Szumski.
I got it right.
Thank you. And I'm so proud. They never have a night off, none of us do, but just imagine they do have families like the rest of us do, and they volunteer to come and participate. And I think it's wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you. A new attendee tonight, we have attorney Ferris Webby, and Ferris is the assistant public defender for Luzerne County, and you're a criminal defense attorney also. Thank you, and thank you for volunteering to be here tonight. So without further ado, you're going to hear a lot of information. We both brought materials that are on the back table. Feel free to help yourself if you haven't already, and that has to do with concealed carry, Castle Doctrine, and Pennsylvania gun laws. So with that, Stefanie, are you going to lead off?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Guess I'll lead the charge. Before I begin, I typically do this now that we have, I think we're on close to 15 presentations. That's what we were just looking at. Sadly, I didn't keep track in the beginning, so I'm trying to go off memory about how many we have conducted. So that means throughout Luzerne County, we have presented to thousands of residents. And I think it's wonderful, as was stated already. It's wonderful to see the attendance because people are interested in what their rights are and what they should be aware of when it comes to carrying either concealed or open carry. It gets interesting when we start talking about open carry. One of the questions I like to start out with is, how many people have come to this presentation before? Wow, not many. I am impressed. Yeah. One of the last ones, almost every hand went up because what they said was, there is so much information that's provided. Although it's all great information, there's just so much, and they learn something new every time they come. I had one person attend, I believe he said five presentations, and he enjoyed every one. He got something out of every presentation. So that's why I like to go through it. How many people have a license to carry?
That's your normal response.
Yeah. How many people have a weapon? Have purchased a weapon? Okay. Okay. And this is when I like to start. Do you have some?
I don't have the mouse.
Oh, okay. As people who in this population that typically come to our presentations, they know a lot about their rights to carry, the Castle Doctrine, stand your ground. They know a little bit about that. What I like to start out with, and what is very popular these days, being that we have a presidential election, and a lot of cases that have been high profile that consist of drug and violent crime issues. The Second Amendment comes up every time. Everybody here knows what the Second Amendment is, right? That's the typical response. But what people don't know is that, if you hit the next slide, the residents here, the citizens of Luzerne County, and the citizens of Pennsylvania, our rights are better protected under the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, Section 21. And this states that we have the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves, and the state shall not be questioned. And this specifically, sorry, you jumped in any time. The Pennsylvania statute specifically points to, article I should say, in Section 21, specifically points out themselves, meaning us, our right to protect ourselves, where the Second Amendment goes into our right as militia to bear arms. This is more directed to our personal rights to protect ourselves and our loved ones.
So if you live in Pennsylvania, you get a gun argument with somebody and they're trying to argue your Second Amendment right and everything like that. Second Amendment right can't be argued. It is written a little weird. This is not. This is your style. You say, no, if I live in Pennsylvania, we have the right to carry, we have the right to bear arms in defense of ourselves. It's not a well-regulated militia. It's nothing like that. It's very plain, simple, very easy language, which most of the laws in our crime code are not, as you will come across and you'll see. But this one is.
And Pennsylvania House Bill 40, describes the importance of this article. It states that it is proper for law-abiding people to protect themselves, their families, and others from intruders and attackers without fear of prosecution or civil action for acting in defense of themselves and others. They're explaining why this is so important and why this is a better protection for us as residents of Pennsylvania. And it goes on to say, Pennsylvania residents and visitors have a right to expect to remain unmolested in their homes and vehicles. And they give a definition of what unmolested is. Need not surrender your personal safety to intruders and or criminals. Now I'm going to go into the Castle Doctrine itself. And give you a little bit of a background, and we will cover the Castle Doctrine, and then go into stand your ground, and we'll explain the differences between the two, and hopefully at the end you will understand your rights and when you are able to defend yourself and your loved ones using force. The Castle Doctrine is a common law doctrine, and I have there because most people don't understand what common law doctrine is. It evolved from cases, through cases, and it developed through that. The common law Castle Doctrine stated that your castle is your home. You have certain rights within your home, certain protections. And within your home, if someone comes and you feel that your life is threatened, you have a right to protect yourself and use force, including deadly force, without having to retreat at all. There is no duty to retreat in your castle. However, with the common law doctrine, it states outside of your castle, if you have the ability to retreat, you must do so and not use any type of force. And so this was very confusing. People were coming up to me and asking, what is the difference between stand your ground, castle doctrine? I just don't understand it. And what the legislators decided to do, they decided to expand the castle doctrine. And they wanted to specifically put more emphasis on stand your ground and explain to people how and when they are able to defend themselves. So on June 28th, I believe it was, 2011, Governor Corbett signed into law the expansion of the Castle Doctrine, which included the stand your ground. So stand your ground just took place, it was just implemented in 2011. And what that states, stand your ground states that if you feel that your life is being threatened, you are able to use force, including deadly force, to protect yourselves and your loved ones. And this is outside of your castle. So they showed a clear distinction. In your castle, you could use force without having to retreat. And outside of your castle, if you felt that your life was being threatened, you did not have to retreat. You could use force. The Castle Doctrine, the presumption of threat with the Castle Doctrine. You can presume that the imminent use of force is necessary when these two things both occur. First, a person is unlawfully and forcefully entering, or has entered and is present within, or is unlawfully and forcefully attempting to remove another against his or her will from a dwelling, residence, or vehicle. The second factor is you know or have reason to believe unlawful entry is occurring or has occurred. She's going to just grab me some water. Is it hot in here?
Yes.
Okay. It's right over here panting a little.
I'm going to dig to the second one. Stephanie's taking a drink. During this presentation, we're going to give you scenarios. These scenarios that we give in, also when the time comes that you could ask questions. Any scenario you give us, we have to be able to even remotely answer your question, we have to stipulate that every single fact you tell us is true. So basically, if we go through a scenario with you and you say, okay, guy breaks into my house, can I shoot? Well, we're just going to assume that all of these things that Stephanie's going to go over happen, okay? And then we'll say whether or not you can. So basically, what we're trying to say is, we're not telling you that if this exact situation happens, you have the ability to shoot someone. We're trying to tell you what has to happen for you to be able to use lethal force. And again, we'll go through this more as we go into it. But
and I apologize, we typically started out and I may have missed it in the beginning. If anybody has any questions through the presentation, please save them to the end. Because as I stated earlier, we have presented so many times, we sort of anticipate the questions that are going to come out of the groups we are presenting to. So hopefully we will be able to answer it before the end of the presentation. So as we discussed, there were two factors with the presumption of threat with the Castle Doctrine. And we talked about a dwelling, residence, or vehicle. What's important is you understand the definition of dwelling, residence, and vehicle. And I know it sounds foolish. Believe me, I know that. But there are certain instances, that you may question, well, that is part of our dwelling, but it would not protect you under the Castle Doctrine. So a dwelling, any portion of the building or structure, including attached porch, deck, patio, even if it is movable, which is for the time being the home or place of lodging for the actor. And one of the questions we get a lot with dwelling is, well, what about our shed in the back or our detached garage? It has to be attached to your home. That is a very common question that we receive at every presentation. Residence. A dwelling in which a person resides temporarily or permanently or visits as an invited guest. And
Just to jump in there, that would include if you're staying at a hotel.
And I have pictures of all, I was going to say,
that's
we added all those fun pictures. This group will know, some Greece, if you're a guest at someone's house, had a slumber party, a hotel, Penn State fans, staying in a vehicle. These are all considered residents, temporary, permanently, or invited guests. So you have the right to protect yourself and using force without having the duty to retreat.
I'm going to jump in here for 1 second. Normally, in addition to myself and Stephanie, the first assistant district attorney also does a presentation with us. He loves PowerPoint. So he randomly throws in graphics and other things too, and we don't always know about them. So I may be surprised at some of the pictures that pop up because these get changed on me all the time.
And then he yelled at me because he did not like the Grease picture. So we go back and forth and fight over who has permission to put what on the slides. Vehicle, a conveyance of any kind, whether motorized or not, designed to move people or property.
We have examples.
Those are all considered vehicles.
That's right, it goes back to
You
that
would
car.
think it, right?
And we didn't need a license to ride a horse, we don't need a license to drive a car.
That is your vehicle,
That's
whether
right.
motorized or not.
There she goes.
Lancaster, you see a lot of Amish in Lancaster. This is their mode of transportation. So you have rights on this donkey and in this vehicle, you have rights to protect yourself and not have the duty to retreat. And it is important to know unlawful force also includes confinement. So you do not have a duty. You can use force to protect yourself in that situation as well. So with all of this, there are also exceptions. There's always exceptions when it comes to these laws. They provide 4 exceptions which removes this presumption of threat. You're presuming in these situations that there is a threat against yourself or your loved ones. These are 4 exceptions, however, that eliminate that presumption. The first one, the person against whom the force is used has the right to be in or is a lawful resident of the dwelling, residence, or vehicle, such as an owner or lessee. So, believe it or not, you cannot shoot your husband, women, guys out there. Or you cannot invite your people over as a guest just so you can get them in your home to shoot them. And then when we get them out, then they start saying, well, if we shoot them outside our house, we're going to
We can drag them in. Now listen, the last thing the police want to see when they walk up to your door is a bloody drag mark from your porch into your house. You're not going to see that, so no. Let's not do that. Anyway, the porch is considered to be part of your dwelling, remember, because it's an attached portion.
Yes.
So we don't have to do that anymore. Right.
And Ferris, please feel free if you want to chime in at any point. You could jump right in. We love having guests
Boys, the
here.
camera's educating people.
This is one that we get so many questions on. The person sought to be removed as a child or a grandchild or in the lawful custody, guardianship of the person against whom the protective force is used. It is undoubtedly the worst to go through a child custody dispute, and we know that. However, the law was not placed there to interfere with family law, to allow someone to use force against another individual because they're disputing over custody issues. So this is an exception. You cannot use this law to protect yourself in those situations. However, I do like to point out all of the time on these cases, although we're saying child custody disputes, the presumption of threat is removed in these situations. that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be placed in a situation where you have to protect yourself and you have to use force, including deadly force, to protect yourself. Although that doesn't fall under this law, you may be protected under self-defense. So there are other situations that you can be protected, but the presumption of threat under the Castle Doctrine is removed in these cases. The third exception, the actor is engaged in a criminal activity or is using the dwelling, residence, or occupied vehicle to further a criminal activity.
I'll jump in on this one. So if you're a meth dealer, and you're in your basement and you're cooking meth, and you have somebody break into your house to steal your meth, you're not covered.
They call it, there's a legal term, clean hands. You have to have clean hands if you want to fall under this presumption of threat. I always say you can't get rid of your partner or your competition by using this. No, you have to have clean hands. If you're bringing criminal activity into your home, that's your problem. You will not be protected under the Castle Doctrine. The fourth exception is the person against whom the force is used is a peace officer, acting in the performance of his official duties, and the actor using force knew or reasonably should have known that the person was a peace officer. So if Brian walks in a full uniform and is going into a house that is a meth house, and typically when they're going into a home like that, they're barging in, they're screaming, police, police. They do not have a right to shoot someone coming into their home. So the presumption of threat has been removed in that situation. So as long as none of those exceptions, those four exceptions we just went over, as long as none of them apply, the intruder or attacker is presumed to be intending to commit. So when they're coming into your home, they're presumed to be intending to commit death or serious bodily injury, or kidnapping or sexual intercourse by force or threat. So stand your ground. This is Sam's slide. I like it. So.
That's the no.
So under the stand your ground, I thought this was cute. I had to put it up there. It was dark. I felt threatened. The Easter Bunny was shot. And as I discussed earlier, the difference between stand your ground and castle doctrine. Stand your ground is outside of your castle. You do not have a duty to retreat, and you have the right to stand your ground and use force, including deadly force, if it's slow. Sorry.
Yeah.
One, you have the right to be in the place where attacked. You believe it is immediately necessary to protect against the four that we just talked about: death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or sexual intercourse compelled by force or threat, and attacker displays or otherwise uses a firearm or replica of a firearm or other weapon readily or apparently capable of lethal use. So all three of these need to be met in order for you not to have a duty to retreat. And it's sad that Sam's not here because this is his slide. Believes, it must be a reasonable belief. It must be a reasonable belief that it is immediately necessary to use force, including deadly force, to protect yourself. You must be able to convey in a situation your belief why it was immediately necessary to use that force. I know you like to.
I'll tell Sam's story.
Yeah, please.
So, around Christmas time, first assistant district attorney was at Walmart, shopping for different, various things for Christmas. He happened to see his friend there, and his friend was with his, I believe, 5-year-old child.
Hit the next slide and you'll see. You put them up.
That's time. Nothing bad happened to Connor, just a nice picture of Connor. So while they were at Walmart, Sam happened to see gigantic 4-foot-long Nerf swords. So he proceeded to give Connor one of those swords.
Because he's such a good friend.
So now you know what happens when a 4-year-old has a 4-foot-long sword at Walmart. things start getting knocked off the shelves, and now he wants it, and he's getting that sword no matter what. So of course, Sam gave him that sword. So the purpose of this story is, while that says replica firearm, a weapon readily capable of, causing you harm, a 4-foot Nerf sword is not going to qualify as that. So that's why it goes back to the reasonable belief. You have to be able to, you're going to have to be able to convey to the police or investigators that you had a reasonable belief that your life was in danger. The 4-foot Nerf sword is going to be a really hard argument.
And hold on before you go to that
Yeah, but
next
you'll
slide.
throw
Go
them
ahead.
in JD for the.
And when we talk about reasonable belief, we like to talk about certain situations that we have encountered in our time in office and working in the district attorney's office. One situation, because in order to convey that you believe that your life is at risk, you have to have a belief that that gun that's being pointed at you is a real gun. And it's very difficult in certain situations because what we have come across in our time is that some of these weapons that are fake, they look like squirt guns, have been turned into real weapons. And then some of the fake guns that these kids have on the streets look like real weapons. And that has become a major issue. And so this is why these next few slides are very important.
I'll just jump in real quick again. The criminal element in this country has gotten incredibly smart, believe it or not. They're actually doing things to further their
Agenda.
ability to not get shot, basically, by the police. So what they're doing is, one example is airsoft. I don't know if anybody in here has ever heard of an airsoft rifle. So an airsoft rifle shoots a small plastic BB, basically. They're actually used in law enforcement and military training. They're also used by teenagers, even older adults, to role play. They might play, military games, capture the flag, things of that nature. They are exact replicas of the firearms that they're designed to be. The only difference is most of them, the tip of that weapon is orange, and that's to signify that it's not a real weapon. Well, criminals now know this. So what the criminals are doing are actually taking a regular firearm and painting the tip of it orange. Now the purpose for that is, if I encounter you on the street, that's going to cause me a moment of pause. And in that time, they're able to discharge their weapon before I can. So that's just another thing that we're now facing.
And it's just the opposite too. I'm sure you've heard the term suicide by cop. They use it not just to harm officers or get out of a situation, they do it so they can be harmed. So a law enforcement officer does not realize if it's a real gun or not. And an example would be, I'm sure you may have heard about it in Pittston. There was an incident where a man in a wheelchair was outside of it was a senior living center. And he was telling people that he was going to harm himself or others. And so the police were called. And when they showed up, they were begging. We had witnesses that stopped in their car to listen, to see what was going on. The officers were begging him to put the gun down over and over and over. They believed what was in his hand was a real gun. And he was smoking a cigarette, and he put it down, and that was the moment he was ready, and he put his weapon up. And mind you, there are older residents all throughout in the background. That officers are working in the back to try to get them out, so no one else could be harmed in the meantime. He puts the weapon up, and they shoot him. When the district attorney's office and the Pennsylvania State Police did the investigation, we needed to determine if it was a justified shooting. My detective, who he was a police officer all of his life, he was chief of police in Kingston, then came on and has been working in the district attorney's office for probably 7 years. So you're talking about a man with 40-some years of experience on the job. He didn't know if that was a real gun or not laying on the ground. He had to literally get down it was dark out, with a flashlight and stare at it until he realized it was a BB gun. These weapons look real. And in this situation and others, Sadly, officers are faced with this every single day. And this is why we're presenting this to you. This is something you can be pointed at you. If that looks like a real gun, you need to protect yourself. Quick, what's a real gun?
Okay, but
Right.
everybody just did that, and everybody said, okay, the right side. In that time, that's gone. That time is gone. I mean,
You would be dead by
the
now.
seconds that, the 1.5 seconds it took you to process that, you're done.
And that's the point of this. That's how quick it is. Slide came up, you would be dead. And how do you tell the difference? And I know like professional people here that handle weapons on a daily basis can tell the difference, but most people cannot. Can you tell me which one's real and which one's fake there?
Is real or fake?
Correct.
It's bigger.
I'm impressed with myself for doing it here.
It's fatter.
I didn't know
The
that.
barrel's fatter.
How about this one?
Fake.
However, it could look real. And this came from a toy company. When toy guns are mistaken for real guns, there can be tragic
There's
consequences.
plastic on it.
What about these?
All fake.
They're all
Every
these
single
are
one
all
of them is real.
They're all real?
Every
All
single one.
real.
Wow.
And here's the
If
picture.
you look at these, you can see where the tips of these are painted.
These are gang members.
kidding.
Criminals are actually intentionally doing this, again, to just cause confusion and everything else.
This amuses me.
Yeah, that
God.
one, you would.
If you go to the next one, we have more.
Nothing funny.
These are all real. And think about if someone has this in their home.
Super
A
soaker.
child
looks
will pick
like.
that up.
Absolutely, yeah, right. Absolutely.
It's amazing to me.
I'm gonna jump in there. Who here has kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, anybody under the age of 3? Okay, to you especially. I do gun safety classes myself. I have a 3-year-old son. I try to stress this incredibly to anybody that has a young children in the home, and everyone. Keep your weapons secure. I did this as a test because I was looking at statistics and I was looking at videos. If you give a toy gun to a child who is under 3, hand them that firearm, or replica firearm, what they are going to do is immediately turn that gun, and it's going to turn around to themselves, and it's going to point at them. The strongest finger on a child under 3 is their thumb. So what happens is they immediately turn the gun around on themselves, and they squeeze the trigger with their thumb. So it's just one of those things that you have to keep in the back of your mind to keep your weapons safe and keep them locked and away from children.
There was, and it just reminded me, there was an incident that just happened, which you don't think about, but it was a woman and her child, it was actually at Walmart, and they were walking around, and the woman had a concealed firearm in her purse, thought everything was fine, turned away, was picking something up, groceries, and when she turned back, her child was in her purse and shot her and killed her. It's devastating, but it goes to the points that Brian was making. We have to be very careful. Children are smarter than we think. They know how to get their hands on these weapons, and no matter what you say, do not touch that weapon. That's what they want to do. They want it actually is calling them. That's what these children. It's like these children just want to touch them. It's terrible. And when they make them that look like this, they look like toys. You see that kids are going to be harmed by these weapons.
So going on to this one, this is a huge concern for law enforcement. Everybody knows what a super soaker is. That was a legitimate super soaker. What they did is they took and they actually hauled out. They took all the parts out of that. They took this as I believe it was a Mossberg 500, or no, yeah, Mossberg 500 shotgun. They took it, they took the slide off the pump. It actually works with this slide on the super soaker, and they put an orange handle on it. It goes inside of that, and you cannot tell. Unless you actually took it and went up to it and took it apart, you would not be able to tell.
It's frightening. But we wanted to present this to you so you know what we are seeing on the streets and what's actually in our communities. This one was interesting. I had to throw it on there. This is real.
It's a real gun. Wow. You're kidding.
It's a real weapon.
It's a door. What is it?
So, going back, I know we digressed a little, but unlawful use is not justifiable use of force when you are the initial aggressor. I think that's self-explanatory. One of the walks and bites, asks or seeks trouble. You have a duty to retreat if you are the initial aggressor. Unreasonable force used in a deadly force situation. Force must stop when the threat recedes.
Do you mind if I jump in there real quick?
Yeah.
A lot of people ask, oh, well, how many times can I shoot somebody if they're in my house? Well, it's actually very good. What I try to tell everyone is what law enforcement is hot. We shoot until the threat recedes. Okay, that we're not shooting to kill, we're not shooting to hurt. If somebody is approaching us with a firearm, we are going to shoot until that threat stops. And what that means is, if that person is still running at me with a gun that I already shot 15 times, that's why you have situations where there might be 3 officers and somebody got shot 20 times. It's not like you've seen in the movie. People don't get blown back 15 feet. They don't get knocked through walls. I mean, in training videos, we'll see people get shot 6, 7 times and they keep coming at you. So what we try to tell people is, you're going to shoot until the threat stops. If somebody's still coming at you, you're going to be able to convey to police in an investigation why you continue to shoot. Now, with that said, if somebody is on the ground, if they're no longer a threat, that does not give you the right to continue shooting. That is where it becomes a problem. Just to preface this whole thing one more time, I forgot to mention this, and I normally do in the very beginning. If you're involved in one of these situations where you have to use force, there is going to be an investigation. You are going to be, and it'll come a time where you get to choose whether or not you want to speak to the police, but you're going to try to be questioned. There's going to be a full investigation. You, in your head, are going to think, well, I followed all this stuff, I'm completely justified in doing so, and you may be completely right. But the police still have to do their job, and they have to fully investigate.
That's why we have Ferris down there.
That's why we have Ferris.
He can provide his insight. But I did want to mention, when the threat recedes, and I'm glad that Brian brought it up, there was a case, this was out of, I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota. There was an individual who, it was around Thanksgiving, and a lot of the homes were being burglarized and he was scared. And what he decided to do, he believed that someone was going to break into his home. So what he did is he set up a camera, he set up this whole scene, he sat in his rocking chair and waited for this person or persons to come in and break into his home so he can use force against them. And what happened was they did break into his home that night. And it was 2 cousins, 2 teenagers. They broke into the glass window, and he waited for them, and he shot them. And as they're on the ground, the threat has receded at that point because they're unconscious. He decides to walk up to them and continue shooting them. And this is all on video. Continues to shoot them. These are 2 teenagers dead on the floor. This is important because, like I said, the threat has receded at that point. You push if there are weapons involved, you push the weapons or put the weapons somewhere where it's safe, you call 911. That situation, he decided to take the lives of those individuals and now is spending 2 life sentences behind bars. And the question was, well, isn't this the Castle Doctrine? Aren't we allowed to protect ourselves in our home? And that's what his defense was. And that's what his lawyer was arguing in front of the jurors. But what ultimately came about was they were showing what the limits are. There are limits to this. You are, at that point, he knew after the first shot, they were both down, they were incapacitated. They weren't going to hurt him. Could have called 911 and everything would have been fine. However, because he continued to shoot them, pretty much execution style, he now is spending the rest of his life behind bars. So there are very different situations, and as Brian said in the beginning, we can't give you exact facts of what can happen if someone broke into your house. But please, if the threat recedes, I don't want to be the one standing there saying, you went too far, you pushed the limits. And we did have an example too, here in Luzerne County. Benjamin, I believe it was, he pointed a gun at his friends, and didn't they get into a fight at a poker game?
They did. What actually happened was there was a fight earlier. Benjamin got in a fight with somebody earlier, correct?
Yes.
The individuals he got in a fight with came to his home and were pounding on the door. Benjamin's father, correct?
No, wait,
No,
you're
this is-
confusing.
okay, you're
What
right.
happened here is they got into a fight. The threat received that he walked away, put his gun away, got into his car. And the person followed him out and through a 4-inch hole in the window of his car, put his gun through it and just shot him 4 times and killed him. He went after him after the threat receded. The situation.
I'll jump into my story though.
Oh, yeah. Now you can tell your story.
So going into the threat recedes, there was a homicide in Wilkes-Barre. Basically what happened was there was a teenage individual who got in a fight after school.
Yes.
A group of the individuals that he got in a fight with came to his home. We're pounding on the door, kid stuff. Come on, fight. Well, dad comes outside with a firearm, pulls the door behind him and locks it. Everybody takes up, or I'm sorry,
No,
the
you're
kid went out first.
Yeah.
Kid went out first and started getting beaten up. Father comes out, locks the door behind him, pulls out his gun. Everybody runs. Everything's fine. Father chases the individual, shoots him in the back.
Oh,
That's where it
that's-
becomes a problem.
That's
The
right.
threat receded. He was completely legal in everything he did until he chased him down and shot him in the back.
And then the third one, if the person against whom the deadly force is used is a law enforcement officer and the shooter knew or should have reasonably known, you are not allowed to use force in that situation. So just to sum it up, you do not have a duty to retreat if you have a right to be where you are, you're not engaged in criminal activity, you legally possess your firearm, that is very important. You have the belief that deadly force is necessary, and a firearm, replica firearm, or other lethal weapon is displayed. And I always point to that. Some of the questions we get is, other lethal weapon, what's a lethal weapon? Use your common sense. If you feel that your life is threatened by a weapon, anything that could harm you, and some people may say fists could be a weapon. If you can reasonably convey that your life, you felt that your life was being threatened, this would apply.
Nerf sword does not.
What did you say?
Nerf sword does not.
Use of force for third parties, protection of others. Justifiable to protect another person when you would use the same force to protect yourself. The third person would be justified in using such force, and your intervention is necessary for the protection of the other. I always say put yourself in the shoes of that person. For instance, if you're walking down the street and in an alleyway, someone's screaming, they're being raped, you can put yourself in the position of that person and use the force they could use. So in that situation, you could use force, including deadly force, to protect that person. You could pull out a weapon and protect that person by discharging it. That one, and we try to use examples so you understand. The one example I always use for that was the shooting we had in Plymouth. It was Bonnie's Bar. I don't know if you remember that. There was a homicide outside of Bonnie's Bar in Plymouth. We were called to the scene of a person was shot in a bar and another individual was shot on the street. The individual on the street was dead. The individual in the bar was still alive, but was in very serious critical condition because they were shot in the head. Surprisingly lived, still alive. Me, I'd stub my toe and I would die. So in the bar, what this person did was they got into, he felt that this person was instigating him. So what this man did was he walked up to him while he was facing the front of the bar. So he's facing this way. The guy walks up to him, takes his, having a gun in the bar, puts the gun right to his head and shoots him. In front of everyone in the bar.
Oh my God.
Then proceeds to walk out of the bar, and people were trying to get away. They're trying to get to safety. So there's people on the street as he's walking down the main street in Plymouth. he pulls his weapon again and shoots a man on the street and kills him right there and continues to walk. And for some reason, I don't remember when he discharged all of his bullets, but he did. He continued to walk. The manager of the bar proceeded to follow him out, hid behind a vehicle to see where he was going. When he got to the end of the block, I'm assuming he decided to turn around and get rid of the witnesses. So he turned around and proceeded to reload his weapon. So you see in this video, we have video of it, him slamming the magazine down into the weapon so it was reloaded. He proceeds to walk back. And in the manager's mind, he's thinking, there is a bar full of people right now. I am legally carrying a weapon. I have a license to carry. I need to use it to protect them. And that's what he did. He shot the man, he fell, and was incapacitated at that time. He did save, in my opinion, many lives by doing that. That is putting yourself in the position of all those people. Protection of others. He was justifiably protecting them. And just so you know, when situations like that happen, my responsibility, what I try to do is I try to make sure that the investigation is done at a faster pace, because that person who had to discharge his weapon and is now thinking, I protected them, I know I protected them, but am I going to be charged now? Am I criminally responsible? Am I going to jail? I want to put their minds at ease. So in that situation, I think it took a day to tell him, to sit him down and say, I found that it was a justified shooting. So we try to do it at a fast pace, so you're not just sitting there wondering what's going to happen. Sometimes you hear in different situations that it takes weeks upon weeks. I can't even imagine being that person sitting, waiting for an answer in that amount of time. Liability for injury sustained. The law states there is immunity, civil liability, immunity from civil liability for injury sustained by the perpetrator when legally justified. So if you end up shooting, like in that situation, where he shot the man heading back to the bar, he shoots him. He is immune from civil liability because I determined his shooting was justified. With that being said, that does not mean that a lawsuit will not be filed. We can't prevent them from filing lawsuits. But this will come up and it will be immediately dismissed because of this law. And on top of it, the law states that if you bring an action like this, they are now responsible for your legal fees. If you had to hire an attorney to protect yourself, although this states that you are immune, and you still had to hire an attorney, now they're responsible for your attorney costs.
Play Sam again.
Please do.
So that stinks. You're walking down the road and you get shot in the head. Your family can't sue anybody. That's incorrect. What this law actually does is it allows you to sue the person who actually caused the action. So the perpetrator who that individual shot could actually be sued. It just takes the liability from the person who, didn't intentionally do that. What that also does not mean is that you can't have complete liability. What it also says is that it may be imposed if you're negligent. So if the perpetrator is over there and you want to holster your firearm and shoot some guy over there, then you're not going to be covered. So that's why we try to stress that you need to be well trained in your firearm.
Yeah, and this is the point in time that Sam goes, go on your rant and rant. Because I'm always the one saying we need to be trained. It took me a while to get a license. Brian makes fun of me for that, even when I'm presenting to everybody. But I didn't feel comfortable having a license to carry and carrying a weapon until I felt comfortable using my weapon. And I tell that to everybody because if you're going to pull your weapon out, you better use that weapon because that person standing across from you is going to use theirs. And I don't want to be at a scene standing over your body and having to investigate that shooting. Please, if you have to pull it out, you better be prepared to use it. And I want you to know, and that's why this presentation is so important, because it's important to think about these situations, not when you get into that situation, that's the first time you're thinking about it. You need to be aware of your surroundings, you need to be aware of what you can do in these situations. We have had some of the biggest officers I know, the strongest guys that think that they're the toughest guys, that have been in situations where they have been out for months at a time because they had to shoot an individual, took the life of an individual, and they are having a very difficult time with it. And they're trained to do this. You as just a resident, someone who is not in law enforcement, who doesn't go through the trainings, who doesn't have to sit there and qualify every year, you are not trained to handle this. So be prepared if you have to. There was a situation, and we use it all the time because it's just a perfect example. You may have heard about a shooting in Sherman Hills. This was...
I know it's hard to believe.
I know. This was in 2012, I believe. I think it was the first year I was in office. And the U.S. Marshals, Wilkes-Barre City Police, their Viper unit, Wilkes-Barre City's Viper unit, this is all they do. They deal with the worst of the worst. And other agencies were responding to a resident at Sherman Hills. They believed that there was a violent individual that was wanted in New York City, and he was living, surprise, surprise, he was living in Sherman Hills with it was his father's residence. So they go, they knock on the door, and the father answers the door, and they're asking, do you know where your son is? They know he's in there. They know that. So they're trying to talk to him. They could tell by his posture and the way he's talking that he's not really opening the door much. He's trying to protect his son. And at one point during this conversation, his son, who is under, the door ends up open, who is on a mattress on the floor, under the sheets, pulls out this long gun and just starts opening fire on the officers. It was like, what's that movie? The Matrix. Responding and seeing, I could still envision what that hallway looked like. The bullets were going through the walls like nothing. And these are men and women that do this on a regular basis. The one officer, Matt Stash, he ended up getting shot in the leg. Luckily, he pushed himself, he got himself into, I think it was like a kitchen area, and was able to continue firing to protect the other officers who were out in the hallway because he didn't know what was going on. He only knew where he was at. He didn't see his other friends who were behind him.
Just to jump in there, Officer Stash, in addition to getting shot himself, the reason he did that was he was pulling the father out of the way because the individual that was shooting directly at his father also.
So he really cares about life. So they ended up killing him. And I say this because when we got together at the end, we knew Matt was in the hospital, he was fine. I was sitting with all of the officers that had to respond. Sitting there with these guys and personally knowing these guys and seeing how they responded to this incident. And it changes you. You see how even when you are trained and told you are prepared, you think you're prepared, you're not prepared. I have my sister say all the time, if someone comes after me, I could protect myself, I'll use that gun. Until you're in that situation, you don't want to take, normal people don't want to hurt someone else. So I go on this rant because I just really think it's important that you practice on your weapon and you make sure that you know how to use it, because if you are using it, if someone is coming after you, they will use it. And I put this up there too, because someone came up to me after our last presentation, said, even in your house, I think it's important for people to know, and they train other individuals, it's important to know that in your house it's very different. The noise is going to be very different. What is it called, the muzzle?
Muzzle?
Yes, yes. And they asked me to include this in the presentation because in a home it is very different when a firearm goes off. And these are things that professional trainers do go through with you if you are interested in that. Oh, that's the end of my section. Now Brian will talk the most.
All right, so we already went through who has a license to carry a firearm, who actually uses it, if you don't mind answering,
Who needs one?
who actually carries on a regular basis.
Hey, did you notice that it's not a permit?
Now, I've been trying to stress that. It's not a permit, it's a license.
Both illegal.
I get yelled at every time, that's why I'm
They're
telling you.
both illegal.
So in Pennsylvania, like most other states, it requires people to have a license to carry firearms. And it's actually regulated by that crazy number and letter.
Statutes.
It's Pennsylvania Consolidated Statute 6106. It's firearms must be carried without a license. That says,
Constitutional.
any person who carries a firearm in any vehicle, or any person who carries a firearm concealed on or about their person, except in his place of abode or fixed place of business, without a valid and lawfully issued license under this chapter, commits a felony of the third degree. Now, what we forgot to tell you is that if you want something written so that nobody can understand it, you have an attorney.
That's right.
Apparently important to understand. It's very simple.
Give it to an
If
attorney.
you actually read that, what it says is, if you're carrying a firearm on or about your person, so what that is anywhere on your body where it's going to be concealed, or if it's in your fixed place of business, where you work, as long as it's your fixed place of business, you have to have a license. So, a license, you definitely switch some of these slides up on it. A license to carry a firearm. License is required to carry your firearm on your person or while loaded in the car. A license is in the form of a Pennsylvania license to carry firearms or a permit issued by another state that Pennsylvania recognizes as valid through a reciprocity agreement. They're also known as a concealed weapons permit in other states. Go back to this for a moment. Just so everybody understands, when we say concealed, right now what I'm doing is open carry. You can see this firearm. A lot of people get confused on concealment. If I were to pick up my jacket, I were to put it on, and my coat goes over that firearm, that is now concealed. Any type of concealment that it's covered, that's going to be considered concealment in the law's eye. Additionally, if you're in a vehicle, it could be sitting on the seat right next to you. The fact that you're in a vehicle makes it considered concealed.
And we wouldn't suggest you driving down the road with it out the window.
I guess somebody has done that already.
Ferris is available.
I mean, if you had situations where they're like, well, I'm open carrying. But once that person gets into the car,
No.
it's concealed. So you better have a license.
So when you need a license to carry, it's a crime, again, if you carry without a license in your vehicle or concealed on or about your person. You do not need a license if you are in your home or if you are at your fixed place of business. Again, at your fixed place of business. If you work at McDonald's, please don't carry your firearm, and if you do, make sure you talk to your manager because somebody might get upset. It's basically referring to a business owner. So that if you want to protect your business, that's why that was written into the law. Again, when you do not need a license, would be to open carry.
And I know it seems like common sense, but on or about your person, obviously that means your purse, your backpack, anywhere it's concealed on you. Had that question before.
Yeah, I actually jumped to the next slide and I realized what it was. Sam put it on.
Yeah.
Not a fixed place of business would be if you were a taxi driver. That is not a fixed place of business, obviously, it's movable. Another example I gave falsely the one day was a food truck. If you run a food truck, it's not a fixed place of business, so that the law wouldn't apply to you then. And again, Sam with farm number, this is not a fixed place of business. This is a word on open carry. So who here has heard of open carry?
It's legal to open carry, I do all the time.
It is, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I would never argue that. What are the problems with open carry?
What you just showed the example of, if your code goes over it, then they'll arrest you because they want to fill up their quota.
There is no quota. So let me go over some of the problems with open carry. I've been a law enforcement officer for 10 years. I started in the borough of Avoca. I also worked Dupont. I worked Wyoming, West Wyoming, Pocono Country Place, which is fantastic. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. So to give you an example that happened 2 years ago, 2 years ago, got a call from the Pittston Township Police Chief, and he said, "You got to help me out. You got to help me understand something." He said, "We had an individual today who was walking down the street with a firearm, totally legal, 100% legal. The problem was, when that happens, if all you individuals here, when everybody starts calling the police, they don't say, 'There's an individual walking down the street legally open carrying.' We don't get that call. We get, 'There's a guy with a gun. You guys need to get here.'" So what happens is,
Idiots.
you
The
have,
sheep love America.
now this was in Pittston Township. I don't know if anybody knows the northeastern part of Luzerne County. It's incredibly small towns. You have Avoca, Dupont, Pittston, Duryea. They're all very small towns. So what happens is law enforcement agencies help each other. So what happened there was, they got a man with a gun call, and it wasn't from 1 or 2 individuals. It was probably from about 10 different residents. So everybody responded. So you just tied up 8 or 9 police agencies for something, and again, it's completely legal. But if you have a reason not to conceal it, or I'm sorry, in my opinion, it's better to conceal it. I'll give you a number of reasons why. And again, this could be argued either way. I'm going to give you my opinion. One, I carry it out because I have to. Law enforcement is going to use a weapon more than the average person on the street. We need it more readily available. With that said, law enforcement also goes through what's called retention training. My retention training in the police academy was, you had to put your holster and your duty belt on, and the instructor would literally grab onto your firearm and try to rip it off your body, and you had to retain it. Again, just to go on a little bit difference between open carrying with law enforcement and regular civilians is, who here wears a belt on a regular basis? I'm going to assume a lot of people. A lot of our belts, because most people are frugal like myself, we like to buy the reversible belts. So you got black and you got brown, one belt's fantastic. Here's the problem with that. The way that works is normally the front of the belt spins on a little piece of metal. What that is a weak point. So if somebody sees you when you're open and carrying and they want to take your firearm, what they can now do is walk up to you, and you don't have to worry about the holster failing. You have to worry about your belt failing. Because if somebody pulls it, you're going to be able to rip it right off your body. Additionally, the holster that I have on here is a double retention. And what that means is, it's the firearm is retained within the holster in 2 different ways. One is the holster itself, single retention. The double retention is there's actually a mechanism with the inside of it that I have to actuate something to remove the weapon from the holster. Now, you can carry that if you're open carrying. A lot of people don't. What a lot of people carry with it when you open carry is a leather thumb brake holster or a Focus holster, and they're not holsters that are made to be, for lack of a better term, jostled with. You don't want people yanking on them, they're not really going to stand up to it. Again, and I have absolutely nothing against open carrying. I think it's, I have something against open carrying. Again, I understand it's completely legal. I give you a law enforcement aspect on it. That's my side of it. I see where it's a problem. I agree that it's 100% legal. The problem is, it presents problems for law enforcement that don't really have to be presented. In my opinion, when I'm off duty, I don't carry open. I carry concealed. One, I want the element of surprise. I don't want somebody to know I have a firearm. I don't want somebody to try to take my firearm. That's my firearm, I'm going to keep it.
And,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Till the UN
And it's
comes.
just going back to what he said, Pittston is just one example of a call we get. We get these on a regular basis. When people are walking down the street and there is a weapon, you naturally become concerned. 911 is inundated with calls. Our office is inundated with calls. The police departments in those areas are inundated. You have multiple jurisdictions responding to scenes. They cannot now be in their jurisdiction because they're responding thinking that potentially there could be an active shooter case going on. So that is why we go through this. We are just representing to you what we see on a daily basis. And just say be hesitant when it comes to open carry because these things may happen.
or just be aware of what can happen.
Yes.
To give a little story, I'm going to go into some of the other laws that are going to pertain to the story I'm going to tell, but I want to tell it now. There was a group of individuals in Lackawanna County. They liked open carry. It's their right to do so. So they decided they were going to go out to, I believe it was the Golden Corral in Basin City. So now these gentlemen weren't carrying their everyday, black firearms. They were carrying what you call barbecue guns. Now these are Colt 1911 with pearl handle. They got diamond inlays. These things were fancy, and they were noticed by a lot of people. So I believe there was 15 of them. And they were at the Golden Corral, and as you can imagine, a lot of people got nervous because you got a whole bunch of guys with a bunch of guns walking through the Golden Corral buffet line picking up their steak. So a lot of the patrons at the restaurant approached the manager. Manager, because he didn't want to lose any more business, approached the gentleman and said, "Listen, I'd like you to leave. We don't really want your firearms within the restaurant." "Nope, it's my right. I can open carry." "Well, that's where you're wrong. An owner of a business has every right to refuse entry to anyone they want for any reason. A firearm is one of them." That gentleman said, "Nope, I'm open carrying." They said, "Okay." They called the police. Guess what? They got arrested for trespassing. You are not allowed to be in that business if somebody tells you to leave. So that's just another thing. Stefanie brought it up also. We have individuals that like to open carry. And again, your choice. But as soon as you throw your jacket on and you're not thinking, that coat goes over it, you're now in violation like the gentleman brought up. Another thing is you're not thinking, you're going to walk up to your vehicle, you're going to get in your vehicle, and you're going to sit down and you're going to go the right way. As soon as you get in that vehicle, it's concealed. So you're violating the law if you don't have a license to carry. Absolutely.
Just one of the.
This is perfect time for you.
I need a drink. Until one of the slides is trying to beat me.
I'm from the public defender's office, and public defenders and any defendant or attorney is the first defender of the Constitution. We understand that we defend rights. Of course, the right to bear arms, the open carry falls under that. So that's where I'm at. Yes, it's legal. You can open unless you're in Philadelphia.
Yes.
You can open carry. I understand this. Should we open carry? I think I have the same opinion as the sheriff, unfortunately. I think you got to use your common sense. And here's why. I've been doing it for 30 years. I'm only speaking through what cases I've handled. And let me tell you something. 2 areas on the cut. Number 1, I hope you never have to pull your concealed weapon. I really do. I hope you never have to do it. But if you do, there's 2 things you want to remember if you're open carrying. Number 1, you might be the focus of that crime. You might cause that crime because you're open carrying and my client wants that weapon. That's number 1. Number 2, he brought it out of element of surprise. You don't want anybody to know that you have that because you want the element of surprise. That's the second. Most importantly, I know personally, in our own jurisdiction, that we've had victims robbed and beat just for what they're wearing on their shoes or feet, and maybe a certain kind of hoodie or something. I know in other jurisdictions, thank God not Luzerne County, where people were actually killed for Air Jordan sneakers. What do you think they'll do for your 9mm? You'll never hear a shot. You'll never hear it. So those are some concerns and considerations I would have. I would never carry open. And here's some figures. I think most won't. The last year, I have seen 2 people carry open. One was outside of Wilkes-Barre. He was okay. He wasn't really flashing. The other one was in Wilkes-Barre, almost in the middle of Wilkes-Barre. The kid probably weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. He had a white t-shirt on with the t-shirt wrapped over his gun, and he was walking down the sidewalk. And the first question I asked myself is, why? Why?
Because it can.
Someone wants to take that 9mm off him, he's gonna get it. So just use your common sense. I don't care about people calling cops and having them run and taking the cars off the street. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is you can be a victim. And number 2, use your common sense, because if you have to use that weapon, you want the element of surprise, and you don't want to be the first target. If someone's going to cause something and they know you're armed, you're going to be the first one that they're going to take out. So I'm just using the common sense approach. I do agree with Sheriff.
And once again, we like to tell you and emphasize, you can. You can legally, lawfully open carry. That is your right. We are just here to tell you some of, or make you aware of some of the situations you could potentially get into or become a victim of this situation.
And one other figure that I wanted to bring out, I found out from the sheriff today, that in the last 5 years, there's over 30,000 licensed Luzerne County residents to carry a weapon. And in the last year, I only saw 2 of them carry. 30,000.
I want to jump on that statistic real quick. Now you got to think about the actual requirements to get a license. And we're going to go through it, but I'll just go through it quick and maybe we'll skip some slides. You have to be 21 years old. You have to be a Luzerne County resident. You have to be free of any, not any criminal background, but the prohibited offenses that are going to bar you from getting one. So you actually think about our population of 330,000, you break down that demographic, and it is an astounding amount of people who have license to carry who can. Now again, we kind of went through the room and asked who regularly carries. Not a lot of people do. And that could go either way. You can take that however you want, but it just shows you how many people actually can. Other license exemptions. If you are a law enforcement officer, not just while you're on duty, law enforcement, we are not required to have a license even when we're off duty. Military personnel does. If you're on duty, obviously you don't need a license. If they're off duty, they do. If you're target practice, the gun can't be loaded while you're traveling to or from the range. It can be if you have a license to carry a firearm. You just have to watch the range rules. You might pull up in the range and they want you to actually approach the shooting position with an unloaded firearm.
Same for hunting?
I'm sorry, sir?
Same for hunting? The same rule for hunting is target practice?
I think there's game law violations.
You have to be very careful with that. The game laws kind of come into this too. So that I would say that if you're going to be hunting, to review your the game laws. Here's the thing that I don't like to tell people, and I actually have a funny story about this. If your license has expired within the previous 6 months, now this is the most ridiculous lie I've ever seen. It doesn't happen. We wrote it. Right. This doesn't happen. We put a limit on things in life so that you know, hey, this is out, I gotta get it renewed. Not in Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, your license expires, guess what? You're still good for 6 months. The reason I don't want to tell people that is we have people, and again, I won't disclose anyone who has a license, like the actual person themselves, except Sam.
Sam a lot.
Our first assistant district attorney, Sam. Now, Sam's office is literally 1 floor directly above where you get your license to carry. So, Sam, your license is going to expire next month. Yeah, I'm going to get down. Okay. So, now, in Sam's defense, Sam would call me, hey, it's busy today? 40 people here. I'm not giving Sam any special treatment. He's going to wait in line like everybody else. So, all right, I'm not going to do that. Then, I would call him, Sam, want to come down? It's not busy today. I can't, I'm doing something. Okay. So finally, Sam comes. Sam brings cash. Luzerne County Sheriff's Department does not accept cash.
And as Sam says, who doesn't accept cash?
That's right.
Sam here.
So we had to review Sam again. Sam, about 2.5, or no, it was right, I believe it was 2 days before the 6 months expired, actually got his license. So that's a fun story to tell about Sam. I wish it was here. One of the last things here is when you're transporting a firearm from purchase, sale, repair, or moving, provided it's unloaded. Again, if you have a license, your firearm could be loaded while you're transporting it.
And going back to the license expiration, one of the reasons we like to focus on it a lot is if your license is going to expire soon, although you know the 6-month period is here, know that it's constantly busy at the Sheriff's Department. So be aware of that and plan accordingly. An example, my sister came down to get a license. One day it's completely empty. The next day, it was, I think, a 4-hour wait. That's, you just...
Going back to that also, and Stefanie will attest to this, not a lot of law enforcement know that law.
Yeah.
We've had a number of cases in the last few years where people have actually been arrested for not being properly licensed, and by law they were because they fell within that 6 month grace. 6 month grace.
And law enforcement, and we always say they're not perfect. If that does happen, and you guys now, you may know better than an officer that tries to tell you, no, it's expired. That's not the time to fight it. When it gets to us, we will make them, please. I will love to make them aware of what the law is.
Let me just jump in there. I have found that if somebody is screaming on the street that they know their rights, a lot of the time they do not. You don't argue on the street with law enforcement. I'm not saying that law enforcement is infallible and they're never wrong. They very well may be. But it is not going to help your situation if you're arguing with them on the street. Let whatever happen, and you argue that in court. That is where arguments are meant to be made. Obtaining a Pennsylvania license to carry firearms. Almost everybody in this room has one, so we're going to go through it real quick anyway. A license available to residents, and they are valid for 5 years. Applications are handled by my office, and also the sheriff of whatever county that you would live in. I cannot issue a license to somebody else. I can't issue a license to any other resident of Pennsylvania who lives in a different county. You have to go to the county in which you live. Again, you have to be 21. You have to be a Luzerne County resident. You must complete the entire application. For anybody who's ever sat there, we can process an application in 7 minutes, beginning to end. A lot of times we're held up by people that don't have their license or their application completely filled out, and we have to wait for that. You have to have 2 character references, preferably Luzerne County residents and not family members. If somebody can't find 2 people who are not their family members that'll say, oh, it's all right, you can have a gun, I'm concerned. So please just give me 2 people. When you come in to get your license, the reason that everything has to be done in person is that we are going to take a digital photo of you and we're actually going to take an electronic signature. That's all done at the office. Things that are required. You need proper identification. You must have a PA driver's license with your current address and photo, or a PA non-driver's identification card with photograph in the current Luzerne County address. These cards are issued through PennDOT. If you are not a U.S. citizen, anybody here not a U.S. citizen, see me after. There's a lot more paperwork that we have to do. The last thing, the application process by law in Pennsylvania, I have 45 days to issue or deny your license. Again, for anybody who has one, you're normally issued the same day that you come in. Some of the issues that we run into, if your last name is Smith, there's a lot of Smiths out there. When we run you through the system, it may pop up with that, if you're John Smith, there might be another John Smith in Pennsylvania who has relatively the same birthday as you. Social Security might be relatively close also. So the PIC system is going to actually say that we need to put this in research. We're going to let you know within 45 days whether you were approved or denied. We did that. If you're denied, and I know nobody in this room would ever be denied, you're going to be notified by mail. And what we do, we return a portion of the fee that we collected, and we're going to notify you by mail. And again, if you feel that that denial is incorrect, if you feel that, something in your background, isn't there, expunged, something like that, we actually mail you a challenge form, and then you can file that paperwork with the state.
It's all about fees, see? Fees.
Yeah, this is just for
Everything's
The application
usury.
fee is $20. The sheriff's office has got certified checks.
Usury.
Sheriff conducts the investigation. So, again, almost everybody here has a license, but just to give you an idea of kind of what happens when we do the investigation, it's just like when you buy a firearm. When you buy a firearm, you have something called the PIC system. And what that is, the PIC system is the Pennsylvania Instant Check System. And what that is a database that Pennsylvania State Police operates. And basically, we call in or we use the computer to check your background. It's all done extremely quick, relatively. Sometimes that system goes down and it's not great. We're going to do that. For the most part, if nothing comes up in that research, We may or may not call your references, we don't call all of them. It depends, either we do it at random sometimes, or we do it if something comes back in research and we're trying to verify information. That is really it, and Pennsylvania is much, much different than a lot of other states. I have an uncle that lives in Tennessee. My uncle lives in Tennessee, he had to pay, I believe it was $600. He had to take a 3-day course, he had to show proficiency with his firearm before they would even issue it, and he now has to qualify your annual. So, Pennsylvania is a lot, I don't want to say lax, it's just a lot different. Who cannot get a license? Ironically, in this picture, if you see, you'll see two of the you have Snoop Dogg and you have Martha Stewart. Out of those two individuals, Martha Stewart cannot get a license. Snoop Dogg could. He does not have any.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed that because Sam and I were going back and forth saying it's too much.
Again, somebody who cannot get a license. If you have been declared incapacitated or if you have been involuntarily committed, sheriffs in Pennsylvania have access to something that no other law enforcement does. Sheriffs in Pennsylvania have access to a mental health database. If you have ever been, it's commonly referred to as a 302. If you have ever been 302 and involuntarily committed, you're ineligible for a license. Again, there's a database that is maintained with the state that the sheriffs have access to and no other law enforcement does. You're raising that. Here's a funny one. If you're a fugitive from justice, I'm not going to give you a license. Now, I'll let you know a little secret. I know nobody in this room has this, but if you are a fugitive from justice from a traffic violation, you can legally get a license. But what happens is that does come up on our system. So then I normally get called from one of my deputies who is issuing and said, "Boss, the guy got a warrant." All right. I come out and I try to, as politely as I can, say to him, "I'll give you a license when you go to the magistrate and pay your fine." So we'll take care of you for that. But if you're running from the law, we're probably not going to give you a license. Illegal alien. Sam loves power. If you are an illegal alien, we cannot issue a license. A couple other things. If you have had 3 DUIs in the past 5 years, I'm not going to give you a license, nor should you probably have one. If you are under a protection from abuse court, that is going to prohibit you from obtaining a license. That does not mean for life. What that means is during the order that you are under, you will not be able to get a license.
And now you can't get a gun?
I'm going to say enumerated offenses. What enumerated offenses is, on the back of the application is a long list of different offenses that if you have been convicted of, it will make you ineligible to receive a license. Now, some of those enumerated offenses are rape, murder, things of that nature, aggravated assault, so obviously you wouldn't. I'm going to guess that Ferris probably wants to jump in. Oh yeah, Ferris is going to jump in. I'm going to get a drink.
Let me start where you start. The enumerated offenses, it's not all ridiculous. How about this one? Assault by life prisoner. If you're a life prisoner, I don't think you're coming out to play a gun. Now, here's one that's serious. There is a stalking charge that will get you rejected. Crime of stalking. If you're charged with certain stalking offense, which is not a felony, you get rejected. You're convicted of a small amount of marijuana.
Can't
You're
get a
18
gun.
years old, you're in college, you get a charge, you go to the magistrate's office, someone says, just plead, you pay a fine, you know. You plead, it's on your record for the rest of your life. It's an ungraded misdemeanor, it's not even a graded misdemeanor, and he's not going to give you a license because you have that small amount of marijuana charge.
And Ferris, just to interrupt really quick, I've had, just in probably the past month, a dozen people come to me and ask me for advice on what they put down. Some of them, like going to this small possession. It is, if you could spend up to a year in jail on these charges, on a charge, you are to report that. Most people don't even know what the maximum would be on any of these cases. Some of these individuals that came to me said, I got probation, I didn't spend any jail time, and one individual was actually charged for lying on that application.
You only had one?
Well, one that came to me.
Okay.
But the Pennsylvania State Police have gotten really active on prosecuting individuals who lie on these applications. And that's why we want the community to be aware and communicate with each other to let you know we really need to understand these applications.
She calls it a lie, I call it a misunderstanding. And that's one of the reasons I asked her if I could be part of this, because I want to give a little warning to these people. I don't need any more business, believe me, I don't. And I think everybody here is a law-abiding citizen, I want to keep it that way. And what happens is, you got two forms that could screw you up. One is the state, which is not really that bad. The other is the federal one. You want to see a statute that you can't read? The federal one is really messed up, and that's what's going to kill you. I had an Ashley police officer. I got involved in a case. He asked me to talk to this guy. I didn't represent him, but I talked to him anyway, tried to help the guy out. Same thing. He goes in, answers C, that's the question, and it's almost identical. And it's more than 1 year. That's the wording. The wording is more than 1 year. If you're charged with, if you have a felony, everybody knows that. That's not a problem, okay? Or any other crime for which a judge could imprison you for more than 1 year. Now, what does that mean? Well, say we have that 19-year-old kid down in college, and he gets let's say, he gets in a fight and says to the other guy, I'm going to kill you, and they fight, and he gets convicted of a terroristic threat, M1. It's a misdemeanor of the first degree. He's a college student, now he's got a good job, he gets in front of a judge, he has no prior record, everything's fantastic. He gets 6 months probation, does his probation, he's gone. 40 years later, he goes to buy a car. He checks off, no. Now he's got a felony in the second degree.
That's another, if I can, just jump in here. This is a lot of things that a lot of times people forget, and I deal with it every day. Well, that was 30 years ago. Your record never goes away.
No.
It is with you for the rest of your life. If you were arrested for a drug violation in the early 70s, it's there now.
And an Ashley police officer came up to me and was begging me to do something. Any police department that has a gunshot in their district is having this problem. He said 3 or 4 times that month, that gunshot called him, and he had to go and arrest that person for a felony of the second degree. Now you're a felon, if you get convicted.
No, yes, and I do want to thank Ferris because the majority of the people that are being charged with this, it is a misunderstanding.
And it is. You know what? If I get a client who had a delivery charge 4 years ago, and he went to a state correctional facility for 3 years, and he was convicted of felony, and he walks in and tries to buy a gun, then go ahead and arrest him. He should be convicted. He should be sent to jail. But if I get this guy that comes in and doesn't, he goes, I got probation. What are they talking about? It says 1 year. Federal one says 2 years. This says 1 year. What are they talking about? Now you have F2.
Yeah.
Now, so the cop comes, he arrests you. Now you got there's an arrest record. Anybody can look it up. 2 instances. A few years ago, I had a state correctional guard who was lined up for a state correctional job. 20 years ago, he got drunk, threatened to kill himself. So they put him in a facility for 72 hours. You're able to find it.
Yeah, this is.
For 72 hours. He didn't know it. He didn't know anything about it. He goes to try to file. Thank God he didn't arrest. But what I did was I went into the court and I lifted the disability. You can do that. You can lift the disability. And he got his job. But more importantly, last 2 months ago, I had another state correctional guard. He was working. He was working. He goes to try to buy it. He wants to go buy a gun. Fills it out and he checks off. No. A few years ago, he got in a fight. He got convicted of simple assault. And he got probation. He didn't think it was anything big. Got a felony too. He was suspended from his job. He came to me, he was bawling, his wife was bawling, his whole world was falling apart. Now he's got an arrest record. And if you're convicted, you're going to jail. And now you're a felon.
That's ridiculous.
God, police officers are understanding these things and knowing that most of them, 95% of them, are mistakes. They're mistakes, and they're trying to get the word out. So when my clients leave the courtroom recently, because I know there's a spike.
Yes, there is.
My clients now leave the courtroom, and if they fall into this, I tell them, don't try to buy a gun. Unless you
What a
get
scam.
don't try to buy a gun.
And in these situations, and I try to tell defense attorneys, if this does happen, and clearly in these cases, you know, as a prosecutor, you're sitting there saying, we understand this was a misunderstanding. We try to work this out with the defense counsel.
We do.
So you know. Because we're not here to say, too bad, you now have a felony on your record because you didn't understand what that meant. We know and we understand that, and we try to work it out with defense counsel. And because, like Ferris said, we're seeing such a spike because the state police is all over this.
That there are 37 different crimes that will knock you out of the box or cause you to get arrested if you check out. The answer is no. And there's 7 other conditions. Fugitive from justice. Okay? Let me tell you something. The state says that traffic violations don't count.
That does not, right.
Here's another one. You have a harassment charge. You never go to the magistrate's office, or you don't pay the fine. That's not a traffic violation.
Yeah.
That's a harassment. And if you don't pay the fine, you got a warrant out for a harassment. You're a fugitive from justice. You just check off no, you got a felony in section. So be very careful. I know some people want to go buy guns, or if you know people that want to buy guns, here's what I'll tell you. If you have my name's Ferris Webby. Ferris like the wheel, Webby like the duck's feet. Okay? Very easy to remember. Okay? If you have a question about it, call my office. I will tell you. I'm not going to charge you. I'm going to tell you whether to do it. Because I'd rather do that than have somebody get screwed up and killed. If you know somebody's going to buy a gun, and they have a thing in the past, PFAs, any type of arrest. I don't care if it's anybody this week, call me. I'll say yes, or I'll say, I'll check it out, or I'll say no. But just do it. It's free of charge. Don't worry. I'd rather do that. But I wanted to bring that up. I see a spike in it, and it's really good.
And I also tell people, if you question it, put it down. The Sheriff's Department will also talk you through it. If you sit down with law enforcement, they will talk you through it. The law enforcement that understand it. So there are people out there that will help individuals that just question if they would be, if they should be applying for this.
Here's a problem that I just encountered too. I went around and I started talking to some gun business, and I thought we should. And I asked them one question. If the person actually says, yes, checks it off, do you submit that application? But then yes, do you submit the application? I know the Sheriff's Department submits it, but the state troopers worry about it. Because some of the yeses, you're still going to qualify. I talked to one gun dealer who's a very good gun dealer, very respected in the area, been there for years. And he said, if I see a yes on one of those questions, I said, even C? He said, yeah, if I see a yes, I don't even submit it. I tell him, no, I'm not going to submit it. Maybe it's out of caution, he's trying to protect the person, I don't know. But there's some of the yeses that still qualify you, but he won't send it in. So, I don't know if you're going to run into that, but if you have a question, give me a call.
This is a fun one. Obligations to law enforcement. When you're carrying a firearm concealed on or about your person, or in a vehicle, an individual licensed to carry a firearm shall, and shall is an incredibly important word in the law, upon lawful demand of the law enforcement officer, produce the license for inspection. Failure to produce such license, either at the time of arrest or at the preliminary hearing, shall create a rebuttable presumption of non-license. So basically what this says is a law enforcement officer approaches you and says, I'd like to see your license to carry a firearm. If you are issued one, you absolutely have to present it. And there's an interesting story behind this. There was a gentleman at the Intermodal Center in Luzerne. He was wearing a jacket like I demonstrated before. Jacket was over his firearm. People saw it and they got nervous. They called the police. Police responded. Said, sir, we got a report that you're carrying a firearm. Do you have a license? Yep. Can I see it? Nope. Okay. Sir, you have to show us your license. Nope. then proceeded to fight with the police.
And say.
I know my rights.
That's right.
So,
We don't have
what
to
happened
show
was that never was precedent. There was absolutely nothing wrong. That the building was not prohibited. You could carry a firearm within that building. It was properly licensed. There was absolutely no reason. He could have just shown them the license. They would have said, "All right, sir, thank you. Have a good night."
You're not
He
supposed to
didn't.
talk to the
He, for
cops.
some reason, felt his right to carry was being infringed upon, and they weren't. They were just trying to verify that he had a valid license. So the story behind this is, if you have a license, keep it to I get the question constantly.
Yep.
Constantly. If I'm pulled over and I have my gun in my car, what do I do? There's absolutely there's no requirement for you to tell a law enforcement officer at that point that you have a gun. What we recommend is, as law enforcement, if I were to pull you over, I would feel a lot more comfortable when I approach that vehicle. Both of your hands are on the steering wheel. I approach you and you say, "Officer, I have a weapon in the vehicle. I want to let you know I have a license to carry firearms." That's going to put me at rest a little bit. Again, I might be looking for that. I'm going to watch you a little bit differently, but it puts me at rest a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to get you out of a ticket.
Maybe you'll get a warning.
But
For being honest.
Based on money, I don't think so.
It lets us immediately, we know that you're trying to be honest with us. So,
And
Everything's
especially
based on
because
money.
a lot of people, when you think about it, where do you keep, some people keep their gun?
and I'll
when
tell
they're
you
in
two
their car?
stories about that. Go ahead.
Well, I'll let you continue.
No, go ahead.
because-
All right.
Yeah.
So, where does everybody keep their gun if they're going to keep it in the car? Glove compartment, right? Okay. Where do you keep your registration and your insurance card? Glove compartment. So I'm working Avoca. Pull over a car for speeding. Walk up to the car. "Sir, can I see your license, registration, proof of insurance?" "Sure." Opens the glove compartment, a gun falls out on the ground. Makes me a little nervous. So that was one situation. And this goes about telling you whether or not you have a gun in the car. Another gentleman I pulled over. "Who's your left hand?" We got one gun. Wow. So, you're left-handed. Where do you carry your gun? On your left side. Guess where you drive in Pennsylvania? On the left side. So, I pull over the gentleman. "Sir, can I see your license, registration, proof of insurance?" "Sure, it's in my glove compartment." Guess where you have to reach? The right side of the car. So when he does, I see a big gun stare at him. Again, it makes me nervous. This is why we just go over it now. It's not a requirement or anything like that. But before a law enforcement officer sees a gun that they're not expecting, tell them it's there. It just puts everybody at ease, and you're not doing anything wrong, so there's nothing wrong with it.
Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
And through, again, through experience, and that's why I'm here. You guys can chat all you want, but through experience, please don't leave your gun in the car. How many times have I seen criminal complaints? You know, my gun's stolen, go stick it in the car. You know, don't leave your gun there. That's what that's good. Oh, by the way, my clients keep the gun underneath the seat.
They do.
Because you guys keep seeing the blood hanging around.
Where you cannot carry. Post office. Or any other federal property.
Where you should carry is at the post office.
Any port facility in Pennsylvania, you are not allowed to carry. Now, right underneath that it says storage facilities to be provided. We have them at the county courthouse. Here is the issue. We have thousands of people come through a day. We ask you that you not bring your firearms in because we have 16 lock boxes. And we have nowhere near enough because also law enforcement that come to the courthouse, depending on what their, whatever they're doing there that day, they actually might be required to check their firearm. So a lot of times we don't have enough storage. Go ahead.
You gotta get into the court facility.
That's correct. That's a big problem.
Violation
It is.
as soon as you walk in.
It is. And we're working on that. State parks. It is a summary offense to violate park rules. Your firearm must remain in your vehicle, but the rules do not apply to you if you have a license. You can carry it at state park.
Somebody's telling me it was because of
Well, the reason, when that happened, a lot of residents were complaining, when you're going into state parks, you encounter things like bears, things that could potentially harm you. So that's why they changed it. If you have a license, you can carry, because technically you're carrying it to protect yourself. So that was why that was put into place.
And the last one, private property. I usually, again, I said earlier, I have a 3-year-old son. There's one place that I've been a lot in the past couple of years with babies are out there. Babies R Us is an excellent example. On the front door of Babies R Us, there's a big sign with a gun and a red line through it. That means you can't carry your gun there. So that says if instructed or posted. So that would fall under posted. My instructed example is the Golden Corral story. If a business owner tells you to leave, you do not have the right to fight with them. You have to leave.
Most hospitals have the sign too.
I'm sorry?
Most hospitals.
Most hospitals do. The Wyoming Valley Mall is very, very, very tricky. Depending on where you enter the Wyoming Valley Mall, it may or may not have signage that tells you. Help me out.
Laurel Mall.
The Laurel Mall does.
Yeah, the Macy's, you're technically
Macy's,
where.
if you come in through Macy's, it's like, yeah, I think it's Macy's. If you come in through Macy's in the Wyoming Valley Mall and you hit the corridor that takes you everywhere else in the mall, there is a sign there that's this big behind a plant that tells you that you can't carry it. It's crazy, but you have the duty to look for that. Should it be more properly posted? Yes, I agree 100% that it should. Unfortunately, it's not. The Laurel Mall, definitely. We had that one.
Yeah.
That one is posted on every single end. Schools is coming up.
Well, there's yes and no.
Carrying on school property. Now, federal gun-free school zones do not prohibit a properly licensed person from carrying on school property. State law on weapons does. The state law on weapons says that you cannot carry any weapons on in a school building, grounds, or transportation to or from school. The defense for that would be lawful purpose. The lawful purpose would be I'm going to. Right, yeah, if the school has an archery class. I use an example when I was in 6th grade, this would never happen.
No.
When I was in 6th grade, my American history teacher brought in a flintlock musket and fired it outside. That would never happen. Again, I'm not that old, but I mean, I think looking back at it now, like that would absolutely never happen. The school board would be going crazy. But he did that to demonstrate just to see what it was like, to see the smoke and to see how confusing it would have been during the Civil War. We actually had an issue with this for other lawful purposes. Like I said, if I'm at a school conducting an investigation, that's a lawful purpose. We had issues come up where law enforcement officers who were off duty, they were going to a child sporting event or something like that. They were carrying. They cannot do that. Even law enforcement cannot do that because it's not a lawful purpose that they're there. They're there to attend the sporting event of their child or whoever. So we actually ran into that problem. Another problem we had was people running. A lot of schools have tracks and things like that, or like places for them to run around. It says property, or I'm sorry, it says grounds. That falls under that. Even if, again, I'm from the Pittston area, so I use the example of Pittston. The Pittston area middle school has a lot of jogging trails that go out of the school property back into it and it comes back. If you're going to be on school property, you cannot have that marking. Good.
Well, we get a,
Just
as both of us said, you can go first.
last year I was at a seminar down in Harrisburg, and someone was covering similar stuff. And he didn't explain it, but he said, as far as the school property goes, some is yes, some is no. There's the different counties have different cases going on.
Right.
And some came down where, yeah, the search you could, and others, absolutely not. But it depends on which county you're in. So that's not definitely a person I would count.
Yeah. It's not worth it.
And then we get questions like, well, what if we have our weapon on us and we're driving through and it's a school property and we're in our car and we're going through and it says, we know it's school grounds and we know we're not supposed to have it and we have the weapon on us. Who's going to catch you? Like you're driving across the street that is school property and you're going somewhere. I think people started to get a little stressed out when we started talking about this. We're talking about people that are walking onto these properties, who are hanging out on school grounds, who are bringing weapons in. That is not prohibited.
Area government regulations. DCNR state game land. If you have a valid license, you may carry. Going to your question, sir, earlier, you have to really, some of the game laws conflict with it. You have to really understand your game laws if you're going to be hunting. Rails to trails, it varies by location. Some do, some don't. What you're going to look for is the bulletin board at your trailhead. That's going to tell you whether or not you can carry. National parks. The laws of the state in which the park is located are going to govern whether or not you can carry. What is the closest one? Steamtown?
Brickett's Glen.
Steamtown, right? I think Steamtown is the only local one. That's a federal park. Yeah, we'll let them go.
I'm not good with that stuff.
All right, so this is an interesting map.
Sometimes you just gotta be careful.
What this shows is reciprocity with the other states. Pennsylvania, what reciprocity is basically you're allowed to carry in that state with the license from Pennsylvania. If you look, until a few months ago, the only way to get out of Pennsylvania and get anywhere in the country was to go through that small little tiny portion of West Virginia. Ohio, within the past 6 months, just changed their law and that we now have reciprocity with them.
And I tried to find the map.
I'm sorry?
Oregon, yeah.
Oh, you're good on that one. That one did
Did
change.
I update it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So now you can go anywhere south through Ohio or West Virginia. Again, all of our neighboring states still do not honor our
Anything that's blue, right?
anything that is blue, you can go to.
And this is where the majority of our questions.
They will, and what I'm going to try to thwart a lot of questions here by stating a couple things. New York and New Jersey, don't even go there. If you have fire, seriously, it's absolutely ridiculous. Their gun laws are so ridiculous in New York and New Jersey, I cannot even begin to describe it to you. We have law enforcement officers who are trying to be arrested in New Jersey for carrying hollow point ammunition. Law enforcement. So if you think as a private citizen that you're going to be able to go to New Jersey and drive through there with your firearm, it's not going to happen. New York is one of the same things. New York's gun laws are extremely strict. What we tell people, if you're traveling through a state that does not honor our license, and like I said, if you're trying to go north, you have to. And for the most part, unless you want to drive 6 hours or 4 hours west of where you're at right now, you're probably going to go through Maryland or New Jersey, Delaware, or something like that. What we tell people is be cautious. First of all, you could go on the Attorney General's website, theattorneygeneral.gov. You can get this map, and you can get every single reciprocity agreement with every state. Another excellent resource is the NRA. If you go on the NRA's website, they have links to every single state's gun laws, and they have some examples or questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? And they provide the answers for it.
It's very informative.
It is.
Actually, it's easier to understand than going to the Attorney General's.
Yeah, NRA is way better.
Yeah.
They like guns a lot more than the Attorney General. Well, what I will say, if you're going to travel through a state that does not honor our license, there's two things that you can do that are going to make it very hard for any law enforcement to try to tell you that you're trying to carry a firearm, a loaded firearm. What we tell people is separate your firearm and your ammunition. And I don't mean take your magazine out of the gun and put it in the same bag. What I mean is take your firearm completely unloaded, put it in some type of container. It could be a leather or a canvas handgun bag. Put that in your glove compartment. Take your ammunition, put it in your trunk. They're totally separate. Nobody can argue that they're within a reasonable degree of grabbing it and loading it or anything like that. So we try to tell people to separate your firearm and your ammunition if you're traveling through one of these states. Because again, I don't know the laws of all the other states. There are some people, we've had people come to these seminars that actually travel the country. If you see the couple red states that don't honor ours, people will actually travel to the states that will honor California, Oregon, Nevada, and New Mexico, Illinois, South Carolina, New York. They will go to states that honor theirs and get a license in that state so that they can have coverage in as many places as they can.
Right, explain Utah, why that's in green. Because it wasn't Utah in green because if you get a license in Utah, it covers...
Correct. If you have a Pennsylvania license and a Utah license, you could travel to Utah and you could get a license if you have a Pennsylvania license. That takes, I think you're covered in
Almost every
like
state.
47 states.
Yes.
Whereas Pennsylvania, I think it's 37. I think that gives you more of the state.
Coverage.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to Utah for it, you just go to Cabela's, they have a training class.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
That's good. I didn't know that. Okay. So that's really it on reciprocity.
And, well, not with regard to reciprocity, the one thing I do want to bring up, and I know it came out before, with regard to open carry, Philadelphia is very different.
All right, so Philadelphia, we just jump in.
So while we're talking about different areas,
Philadelphia, you cannot open carry unless you have a license. If you have a license to carry firearms, you can legally open carry in Philadelphia. Don't do it. It is not going to work out
because
well.
as Ferris was giving those examples, that is what you're going to encounter.
Don't do it.
It's 100 times worse than Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia is a state within a state.
Walk through the bathroom.
Yeah, they don't care, they don't want to hear it, and you're probably going to go to jail whether you're right, wrong, or indifferent. I try not to carry in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is very different.
That is the end.
That is it.
Anybody has questions, but before that, I do want to thank Representative Boback and Representative Kaufer for putting this on. I know it's a daunting task, and everybody out there, sitting there, thank you. So they deserve a round of applause as well. What days work, and we say this day works, and we show up. So I have to thank you for that. It makes it so much easier. So
we'll stay around for questions. What we ask though is that if you guys have questions, raise your hand. We're going to try to be fair, just go around the room and answer them. But what we do ask is that you just try to keep it down while other people are asking, so that way we can hear them and you can hear our responses. You pick.
we'll start over there.
I have two quick ones. I can take my gun in the bar then.
Well, here's the interesting thing about Pennsylvania. There is absolutely no law that restricts you from taking your gun into a bar. It is
Although we,
bad idea.
yeah, we tell you to hesitate doing that because obviously you're going into a bar to do one thing. And to have a weapon on you, your mental state may not be fully there by the end of the night. So that's the only reason we say hesitate.
And then the other one, like I say, I have a carry license, but I don't have it on me.
You need to carry it with you.
What if I did? What if I left my wallet?
It's going to be a bad day. It said on the screen that
You should join.
you said that if you're preliminary hearing, you're probably going to get arrested first.
Yeah, then you'll have to rest for a period.
You get all that? How you doing? How about yourself? You busy?
And I'm under the opinion that there's somebody in my house burglarizing it. I don't have to wait to see if they have a weapon before I use mine. Is that correct?
No, at that point, your life is not at risk. You are to call 911 and say, I believe someone is in my house. I do not recommend you go into the home and just, and think about it. How do you know that's not, say you have a daughter that came home early?
I understand that. If I recognize one of my, but if he's in the house, he's got his hand behind his back.
But you're
He's
in your
not like-
car in the
Well, if I
driveway.
come down my stairway from the second floor.
Oh, that's different. That's a different story.
Okay,
Yeah, that's very different.
If I'm in my car, I just back out and fall around.
Yeah, get out of there.
Yes.
Thank you.
What are the restrictions on the special weapons? I start from class A weapons and I have a friend who's war. Some of them are quite solid.
There are very few people bring this up. So basically what the license to carry firearms is for is a pistol with a barrel less than 16 inches or a shotgun with a barrel less than 18 inches. Now, a lot of people don't even realize that there are firearms called short barrel rifles. Our department has a few of them. They're 7.5-inch barrel rifle. The reason for that is when we're going through houses, it's very easy to keep against yourself when you're going through doorways and things like that. That is actually covered under a license to carry firearms. I don't recommend doing it. As you know, if you said you have classified weapons, there's an incredibly large amount of documentation relating to them when you get your tax stamp and everything else. You're gonna be hard pressed to find a law enforcement officer that knows all that and has any idea why you're carrying an SBR.
If you have an NFA trust,
they
it's
actually are
different too. If you have a trust, it's different as well. If I have a silencer on me, a police officer can't ask me for documentation, only ATF could.
Well, you're right, you're wrong. A police officer can ask you for anything they want. Whether or not you provide it with them is a different story.
Right.
I know I saw another hand, so I'm just trying to make my way over.
Two questions, easy one first. My wife, she had her license expire about 2 months ago. Does she have to go to reapplication and?
The application is the application process is the exact same whether it's a renewal or a new license. The reason for that is the state system keeps changing, and it keeps changing within the 5 years of each other, so we have to re-enter all the information every time.
Yeah, she'll get it. Second question, okay. We talked about you need to see a weapon. You're in your house, somebody breaks in, you're not sure is it a real weapon or not. What if two big guys break in my house?
You do not have to see it. When you're in your house and someone going through those factors, you believe that your life is at risk, you're confusing it with stand your ground.
Okay.
In your home, you do not have a duty to retreat. If someone's in your home, you have the ability to use force, including deadly force.
My detached garage, I'm out there, the castle law doesn't apply with that. Well,
It
now
does
I'm
not.
stuck in there,
Unless you're sleeping in your garage and your wife kicked you out.
Yeah,
and out there working.
Then stand your ground could technically apply.
Right.
But if you're in your house and someone broke into your detached garage, your life is not threatened at that
No,
point.
I got that one. If I'm out there working at night or whatever, and somebody kicks in the door at me.
The biggest thing to understand here is it's not that you cannot protect yourself, it's just judged by a different set of circumstances. It's just that the Castle Doctrine doesn't apply. Stand your ground still does. You know, if somebody's approaching you with a weapon, you don't have a duty to retreat if they're approaching you with a weapon.
You have a right to protect yourself.
Or I can jump in the bus.
There you go.
I wasn't my garage, just saying, attacked by an armed assailant, and I defended myself, so we could probably.
Well, first of all, like we go
Again,
to.
we just stipulated every single thing you just said exactly.
Sit on. Okay, that's what I
And know that it does take time to go through the investigation, that's why we always say that. And then come out and say
I
it's
didn't use
just.
armed assailant, that's what I
Yes.
said.
And you weren't the aggressor. You were
your castle property attached to the residence you're going. Would that be your yard too? If you were in your yard and someone approached you, your property that, and say you got out of your car, or someone threatened you in your yard, you know, an intruder that might have, you come home at the wrong time and they're heading for your head.
Well, then, like Brian said, the castle, you're covered under the Castle Doctrine. Outside, you have to stand your ground. If there are certain exceptions that apply, that take you out of Castle Doctrine and stand your ground, but you could technically be defending yourself. There are many different situations. So in that situation, you get out of your car, you're on your front lawn. You have a right to protect yourself if you feel that your life's at risk. You have a right to protect yourself, including using deadly force.
They want your video too. I just tell those people about the Democrat, communist, socialist.
Sure, that doesn't mean a firearm.
They want the videos they can watch.
Your car be
considered a weapon. So I gotta put it on Facebook. You give them
What you need to do is jump back in your car.
website. We need to get this.
I'm serious.
Well, in certain situations, that could technically be
Sanity.
the case.
What is John? Give your right name so they can go to your channel.
There's so many.
As long as you feel your life is being threatened, you can protect yourself, is that correct?
I'm pulling it out, so I can read it again, or maybe you should put it up.
Probably reasonable to believe.
Yeah. So I want to you to see it again. were attacked, so if you're on your front lawn, believes it is immediately necessary to protect yourself against those four scenarios that we talked
We're
about.
talking about stand your ground.
Stand your ground. We're talking about outside of your castle. And attacker displays or otherwise uses firearm or replica of a firearm or other weapon. If this all applies, then you are able to use force.
Inside
And do
your-
not have a duty to retreat.
Right, inside your house, outside your house, you can
Inside
protect
your
yourself.
house, someone's breaking in the window, you have a right to use force.
You don't have to see a weapon.
You don't have to see anything. That's the main difference here.
If you
One of the
feel your
biggest
life is threatened, you can't. If somebody's
It's
coming in
assumed.
your window, you just can't.
You're assuming.
It's assumed. It's assumed.
It's the
Somebody's forced to break in.
presumption, the presumption of threat. Someone's breaking into your house, the presumption of threat is one of these things is happening. So you are able to use that force.
What if they don't have another gun? They're still overpowering.
Well, and that's where it comes down to, we're looking at stand your ground. Each situation can be different, and that's why I said, certain situations, someone may say fists could be a weapon. You have the ability, you feel, and you can convey that your life was at risk, you can use force.
That's other weapon.
Why does it contradict itself when it says, like, it could be on your deck, but it can't be, like,
Well, let me
it
tell you
has to
what-
be attached to your house?
let me tell you what-
That's confusing.
This is the bill.
You know,
Here's the- Here's the definition. This is the bill. Dwelling, any building or structure, including any attached porch, deck, or patio. Period.
Any building or structure.
Any, well, dwelling.
This is for the dwelling.
It's a
Where
definition of
you,
it, where you stay.
that's where you're staying permanently, temporarily residence.
Can you define what attached is? The higher power going into the building.
It has to be a
To that vicinity, say for instance, like a deck, it's attached to your,
I could tell you that if I was the DA and you had a garage and it's close to your house, you had a 2x4 touching your house, but there was no doors going in between, that's not going to be attached. You have to be able to get to that person. You have to be able to go through your garage to get to that person in the house. That's attached.
and why, and I know it seems confusing, like deck, porch, it's right there outside of your window, and you guys are saying that, well, what if it's 2 feet away? What they're saying is, it's right there, it's imminent. That person is really standing at your door looking at you. And that's why they're saying, that's why it's considered part of your law. They're trying to show that they're protecting, the law is protecting you.
I have a question, and I don't have a permit. I was probably the only one here that.
You don't have a license? Nobody here has a permit.
It's okay, I get yelled at every time.
I get it. I have a gun at home. I get that. I have an office now. I'm okay to have a gun in the office to protect, but how do you get the gun from the house to the office?
It would have to be unloaded.
In the trunk of a car, or is it
As long
in
as
my
it's
briefcase,
unloaded,
but unloaded?
Again, as long as it's unloaded. What I said, the same thing with that, even in Pennsylvania. What we recommend is separate it. Put one in the trunk, one in the trunk, one in the glove compartment. People say I have an SUV. Same thing, just separate. Put one in the front seat, one in the back.
There are exceptions. Shooting, take a pistol, you want to go shooting. You separate it out, you go to the place.
Put the ammunition in the glove
In the
box,
trunk.
the gun in the
Whichever, right.
trunk.
Yep, separate
And
it
I
out.
could take it back and forth from home to
Yep,
work
yes.
and have it without having to get a permit now.
Again, here's the thing. It's $20 and it's good for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's not worth
But
the
I'm a
hassle
Florida
to protect
resident. Yeah, I'm a Florida resident, working
Wow,
here.
Florida is different. There was something called the Florida loophole. That's gone. So, yeah, you would still have to get a license.
Get a license from Florida, and then reciprocity.
Correct.
I can't just come here and get a license from you.
You cannot until you have a license from Florida. You have to have a license in the state in which you reside first. You used to be able to. There was something called the Florida loophole. But,
You're saying that that's the, I just get the license. Especially if I run
That
into
seems like a lot of work if you're going back to, that's the only reason. Any other questions?
I have two. Is there a possibility to get the form now, or
I'm sorry for the lights.
No, I actually, I normally do, I normally bring a big stack of them, I did not bring them. But what you, I'm sorry, they are, if you go to Luzerne,